Thank you so much for those of you who sent some comments and questions. So before recording today our lectures number 3 and 4, I'm going to answer some of the questions you have raised. And one of the questions was about a request for clarification about why Sen's approach is the capability approach and why Nussbaum approach is the capabilities approach. Now, to a certain extent, they are talking about the same thing. They are saying that either subjective information or resources, they are imperfect indicators of human well-being. It's not that when you ask people how they are feeling about their well-being, that they are unable to tell you anything. They will be able to tell you something, but that might be unreliable for some of the reasons we have discussed. Then it's just the same thing about resources. It's not that resources will not give you any indication about the well-being of someone or even of a country, like GDP per capita. But the main issue, the main difficulty here is how reliable things are. So Sen and Nussbaum, they are saying something which is very similar. They are saying, look at what people are able to be and able to do, which we'll call functionings. And better than that, let's pay attention to how people have freedom or not, agency or not, to exercise these functionings, which is the idea of capabilities. Now, why do they use different expressions to label their approaches? Now, it's very straightforward, and at the same time it's very subtle. Now, why is this straightforward? Because Nussbaum is focusing on the ends. She's talking about valuable beings, valuable doings, valuable capabilities, as she would say, if one see within this set of potentials. And then she provides a list. She thinks that a human life, in order to be dignified, in order to be qualified as a human life, so it needs to be shaped, it needs to be qualified by those characteristics. Now, on the other hand, it's not that Sen disagrees with the list, but the question is about the process at arriving at this list. The main difficulty for Sen is that if you eliminate the process, then you are losing what's the main idea, what's the main, or the core, if you prefer, of the capability approach. Because for him, it's about public reason. For him, it's about the process. If through the process we can discuss, and then he believes, and I risk saying that he believes, so he believes, or at least he puts forward this idea, that people will be able to get or arrive at these basic capabilities. So it is more about participation. Now, it's not that Nussbaum would disagree on these issues. She also puts forward her list as a tentative list. She recognized the importance of discussion and participation and public reason as well. So the difference between the approaches is mainly or mostly a question of emphasis. That whereas Sen would prefer to highlight the notion of process, Nussbaum would rather concentrate, or she would invite us to consider more the ends or what would happen after these processes take place. So that's the first thing. Hopefully this is clear why we talk about the capability approach and the capabilities. The capabilities we are talking about precisely a list, which can be any kind of list. And when we talk about the capability, we are talking about the process. But they are both converging on the notion that in order to have a proper assessment of human well-being and agency and autonomy, then we need to go beyond resources, beyond subjective well-being, beyond Rawls' primary goods as well. And that links, I guess, to the other question that one of your colleagues asked me to address about the difference between Rawls and Nussbaum approaches to the issue of sustainability, in particular to the notion of overlapping consensus and what's the meaning of a normative anchor. So there are many things there. Now, when we are talking about sustainability, we have seen that the two most important approaches, they are not terribly effective. We are talking about Brundtland and we are talking about the three pillars. They are not terribly effective to provide an alternative to the utilitarian calculus of cost benefit. So that's one source of one point that hopefully is clear, but might be the source of difficulty here. Why? Because both Rawls and Nussbaum, they do not think that commensurability is as proposed by utilitarians. Now, the notion of commensurability is at the core of the notion of substitutability and sustainability. Why? Because mostly we are not talking about the level, the overall level of capital not increasing. The question is whether we are willing to accept that some form of capital can be compensated by a different form of capital. Now, very, very clearly here, the main issue is that when we talk about increase in other forms of capital, such as physical capital, machines, equipment, we are saying, well, but what about accepting lower levels of natural capital? We are talking about the environment here. Now, some people would say, oh yes, we can substitute because they do not have intrinsic value. And other people would say, no, but come on, nature has intrinsic value. Now, what happens that Rawls has not addressed that fully, and that Nussbaum has expanded on her book, Frontiers of Justice. She has expanded this contractarian notion of society that Rawls puts forward just to include some environmental issues. So that's one of the things that she's addressing. How can we include nature as if nature would be one of the persons to sit together to define this contract or this agreement? Now, the main issue is that when we talk about normative anchor is what has value, what we think that has value. So if we think that nature or the environment has a normative anchor, we think that it has intrinsic value. If it's not an anchor, it's because it has only an instrumental value. So it can be important, yes, but it's important to achieve other things that are important. So another thing is that when we talk about overlapping consensus, we are saying that through overlapping consensus, this normative anchor can be established. Now, for Rawls, this would be something secondary as far as sustainability is concerned, because people would be there to talk about what's important for them. But for Nussbaum, she's proposing in Frontiers of Justice that this agreement can be broadened. So the main point here is that when we are discussing alternative arrangements, an alternative to utilitarian arrangements, that we do have a list of theories that can help us on that. Now, hopefully these are the clarifications that have been requested. So I'm really grateful that one of your colleagues was able to put this list of questions. I'm very glad to answer whatever questions you might have. We can even use part of our first lecture when we have that hopefully next week to discuss some of these remaining issues. We can leave other issues for our supervisions. But let's talk about it. So hopefully this will be enough to clarify these points. Yeah? Okay? Now going to start recording our lectures for this week. Okay? Take care. Bye.